Welcome, everyone. Aloha to the Watering Hole podcast with Jilly, Water Priestess here. Get your waters ready. We're going to say a little water blessing before we get started. So, just bringing your waters to your heart and breathing all your air out of your mouth. Breathing that air in the nose and out the nose slowly, tuning into that mermaid breath. Thank you, water. Blessings for leading us here. Thank you to God for supporting us, Source for showing us the course. And open and take a drink. All right, everyone. We have my dear brother Chad from our Wakewater Code community here with us. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Excited to be here. Happy as always. Beautiful day.
Yes, and Chad is known for Lawful Waters. You can find his Instagram page as Lawful Waters on Instagram. And also, we've been diving into commerce codes together for the last 3, almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And we have gone live together. We have worked together. We have, hours just going so deep into commerce
So
and
deep.
all of it, all of it. So he's here today to share with us just from
Yes.
the very beginning, man. From the
Yes.
very beginning.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. From the beginning, you're right. We have been at this quite some time. And yeah, it's and that's the best advice you give from the start is, be patient, look at this journey, right? And it's just the more we know, the more we've been growing. So this has been an
Yeah.
awesome ride.
Yeah. So, can you begin with telling everybody how did you first uncover this information? You can kind of go into how we met.
Yeah. So awesome. Thank you for the water. Honestly, you were a part of me being introduced to Kangen Water. That's how we met. I worked with a friend of yours, Zach, for quite some time at BJ's, and I found Kangen Water on Instagram and thought, and I like was super excited by it, but I thought, that's way too expensive, blah blah blah. And so I had all this doubt. And then Zach posted he was going to go live with you talking about something else, and he hadn't posted on his Instagram in a while. And so then I went and then I saw he posted 1 or 2 things about the water. I was like, great, I'm gonna somebody I could trust. Like I used to work with this guy, and so it came in that trust. And I sat down and thought he was gonna sell it to me, but he let me drink the water. And then it's the history from there in regards to water, right? So I got a machine. Probably about 8 months later. I took a long time to buy a machine.
Yeah.
Bree got pregnant, my wife, after she started drinking it 3 weeks, and then we got pregnant. Like we tried the first time, got pregnant, and I'm thinking it's the water, and she's like still not
Right.
sold yet. So we learned later how beneficial that was, and then so we bought the machine, and then I think it was actually before I bought the machine, like a month or so before you and Vic went to Brother Truth's remedy tour that he was having in LA. And I thought it was interesting to look for, and I seen that a picture of everybody there, and I recognized actually the somebody's wearing what I now know as a fez, and
Uh-huh.
I thought, I recognized that, like maybe from like old pictures I'd seen or something. I thought that was interesting, but then somebody mentioned sovereignty or freedom or something was mentioned in that, and around that time, we were talking about family, and Hudson, my son, was going to be born in a couple months, and so I was like really concerned with what the state was going to tell me to do with Hudson. I was like, I don't want to give him the shots because I did a lot of research the years prior. My gut was telling me something was off with that, and it turns out I had tubes in my ears as a child. So I think a trauma I had from my shots made me aware as an adult that it might not be the right thing for my kids, right? So now I'm
Mm.
looking at this state about to push this stuff on me, and you guys posted that, and what really spoke was like Brother Truth talks about like indigenous, like Aboriginal, and so what I realized is like I remember like my grandma talked about, she had some Cherokee Indian in her. Like maybe the right thing for me to do is to like go find my go deeper into that heritage and find like my native roots that allow, because like I'm pretty sure people who are original to this land don't have to do this. I was thinking like
Yeah.
Pechanga Indians or something like that. Like they probably don't have to deal with this that I'm gonna deal with as like a citizen. So I took Brother Truth stuff. I self law master. I took it was only a few things, right? I think you guys signed up for his first class, and I wanted to, and I was like, dang, I missed. So I bought everything else he had.
Yeah.
And what I did is I took a lot of these processes, and without really knowing what I was doing, I just like jumped out the plane, no parachute, like because this stuff was like very deep, and it's worth a lot of money, and Brother Truth was really giving it to us at a value. And
Mm-hmm.
so we didn't do I'll speak for myself, I didn't do my due diligence in understanding the real roots and the history of why we were going out and like opening a trust, and the way it
Yeah.
affects business and credit and all these things. And so that's how really I got started into this information, like finding this
Yeah.
freeing information.
Yeah, and it is important to recognize that we recognize the privilege, and recognize that we honor this process because it is really deep for a lot of people and our ancestors, and they're here with us through the process. And a lot of people, when they first find out about it, they're like, "Wait a minute. So who am I? Where do I come from?" And that was the first code that I really absorbed from Brother Truth at his speech, was my own Native American heritage and my own lineage being watered down, and my grandmother having property taken from her and her native
Mm,
language, and hearing that they were domesticated and forced and colonized into all of these, um, domesticated languages and domesticated ways of being. It's like our ancestors were forced, and that's not that far away from my generation. And
mm,
so for me, when I first heard him saying this, I was like, wow, okay, I'm taking the initiative to really learn this. Although we were ready for it, it was like, wait a minute, so how does the system work? And for me, I found it through water. Water led me to Brother Truth. Follow the money, follow the water, I like to say. And for me, it was like my ego kind of was just like, this is the way out, like fuck them.
yes,
And,
exactly.
and
That's
I was just,
exactly what it is.
oh my gosh. And I was just like, I'm sovereign, walking around like with my inflated ego, like I'm sovereign, and not doing the due diligence and going through the mistakes that I went through with quote unquote the sovereignty process, and how so many of us find this process and kind of bypass a lot of the inner work that comes with it. And then you were kind of paralleling me at that time. You just
Yes.
went so much deeper, and I love that. I always came back to your intentions of the vaccines in your children, and that just resonated so much with me of like, wow, what would I remember thinking like, what would I even do with my children? Like, and I know Bree had a free birth at home, which like props to her. Like that's a whole
Yes.
part of this sovereignty movement, is the mamas out here really choosing that.
Women
So
led
it
in a lot
all,
of ways.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And so can you talk a little bit about the sovereignty process for those who are new to this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the sovereignty process, and the reason why we can stumble at it is because it's all fraud from the beginning. Like, and that's and once you realize that, and you say, oh gosh, this a government that we think, this federal government that we know, man, they violate us from the start. That's where the
Mhm.
ego and the entitlement comes in, right? And so then we learned that the way to correct this relationship that we have with these what we feel as our oppressors is to do paperwork. And you're like, oh, then as people who as from we're from generation of privilege and convenience, right? And
Mhm.
so we hear that a paperwork process has to be done, and I think it makes us bypass again. We just go, oh, well, yeah, I'll get to that. What do I need to put on it? Great, thanks, right? We'll all just kind of cheat on our
Yeah.
work. And so then that stuff doesn't work, right? And so that's why the sovereignty process, if you looked at it online, like I did in 2016, it was like, oh, these are scammers on the internet trying to take your money. And I was like, well, I don't feel that integrity at this guy at all. So I
Yeah.
still followed into,
Which
but
It is important to recognize that a lot of people go online and they're like, oh, these sovereign citizens, like they're just doing it not to pay taxes. And like, we're here to clear up that projection field because that's not the entire truth. That's just what people see from the outside. And people have said that
Exactly.
to me too. Yeah.
Right. And and that's the mistake people come at too. They think that you could just do a paperwork process and then the IRS comes over and shakes your hand and gives you $1,000, said, I'll never bother you again. It doesn't work that way. This is about you learning the law, right? I learned something great yesterday. And, we talk about attorneys being fraud, but a lawyer, we are all our own lawyer because
Mm-hmm.
a lawyer is anyone who studied the law for 3 years, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now, when you are an attorney, you're swearing an oath to the crown, right? And that's part of the bar association, et cetera, et cetera. But in law, we as a consumer, we're defined as our own legal representative. So there's this lawyer aspect that needs to be there when it comes to like knowing the law. But the process of sovereignty is a paperwork process, but you have to know the law in order to run your paperwork, right?
Yes.
And then the other part about it that's confusing from the onset is that from a word magic standpoint, words denote to numbers. And so
Mm-hmm.
really what's off is the accounting. Like that's like people are like, oh, they said this and this about me. It's like they said that about you because the accounting is off on a book thing, on their book somewhere,
Wow.
right? And when we learn these consumer laws, everybody says you have to go back to like when you made your instrument, when the instrument was made. Now, our birth certificate was an instrument that's made. Now, that gave us the authority to make all these other instruments like car contracts, leases, anything where there's a security interest. That's another instrument. So it's about understanding the law behind money left, and we're now on a debit and credit system, and so we got to understand the books and then apply law to the books, right? So the
Yes.
sovereignty process is about the record that they have. And to simplify it for people, I'll say like public record is not like general everyone gets to know record. It's the state's record. That's public record. And so there is public record out there about us that make it seem that we're in a position we don't want to be. They think a certain way about us, right? Because of what's on the public record. And so the sovereignty process is about putting on their public record what's correct, right? And in the most
Yes.
simple, like mathematical terms and like banking ways to look at it is when money disappeared, the thing that they now use to back money is our birth certificate. That's the
Yes.
instrument. So our
Yes.
birth certificate is an instrument, and what we need to do is we need to lay claim to that instrument in a proper way, and that's the record. You have to say what's going on with that instrument, right? And so there's actually laws which govern the rules of instruments, and that's the UCC law. And so that's why you're like, okay, gosh, well, my birth certificate is a trust, like great, I'm in control, but like you also need to understand that it's an instrument. There's things going on with it, so there's an
Yeah.
instrumentality aspect. So
And
sovereignty
I know a
process.
lot of just to kind of
Yeah.
speed some people up that aren't following the journey. I know a lot of people on Instagram who follow our journey know what we're talking about. And essentially, to put it simply, if you're new to this, right when you're born, you get a birth certificate. This is the instrument. This is the straw man. Um, this is your trust. So a lot of people don't even know that
Thank you.
and know that the social security number is a bank account number, and you can look up how many times your identity was traded. So if those of you who have been kind of piecing this together with me, that's how this comes into this. So once you go through the sovereignty process, you're going, and I had this drop come through the other day, you're going from private to public. You're making it known who you are. And that's why the first layer of Brother Truth's work is correcting your status.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing who you are and where you come from. And that's why he does the tribal IDs as well. Although for you and me, we went beyond and really to what does it mean to actually what does it mean through commerce? That's where we're at right now. That's what Chad is explaining. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because from an you said it right. Our Aboriginal, our cultural heritage was stolen from us. The land was stolen from us by way of us getting in the birth certificate contract. We
Yes.
thought it was just for a benefit. We actually, it created a lot more financially that we were unaware of. We gave our power away through that
Yes.
instrument.
And
Yes.
that parallels, just to water weave something in here, that parallels with the Federal Reserve and
Mm-hmm.
when money was no longer backed and it became currency and they printed those Federal Reserve notes and it's connected to your birth certificate, and that's what Chad means by us being pretty much the collateral.
Exactly. Most people will know the dollar isn't backed by anything. No, it is. It's backed by
Us.
by our bond, right? And
Yeah.
it's really but it's the federal government's responsibility of that bond because they made it. We just provided our energy for it. That's what
Yeah.
our footprint was.
And that's what
So
it means
yes,
to really be a citizen. When you're a citizen of the United States, there's a difference. Yeah.
yeah. And the simplest way people could look at it, if anyone ever asks you, "Are you a citizen?" You're a citizen of heaven, right? Because
Mm,
all of this stuff it all honors the law that is a biblical law, that is a Christ
mhm.
law. Um, and so to be a citizen of anything, you only want to be a citizen of heaven, just a
Yeah.
citizen of heaven.
And it's just so interesting to me too. I'm going to do another podcast on that lens and the spiritual connection to this, because recently, just to weave this in here, my work in really building the trust, for me, I just started getting all of these drops about like, in God we trust. Like, and then when we were on our live together, trust the plan, trust, comma, the plan. And I love how so many in our sovereignty communities say that we're here to inherit the earth, not just own it. And what was that quote
Mm.
you say a lot? We don't own anything.
Oh yeah, own nothing and control everything.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yeah. Ownership is ego in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
That's what we
Yeah.
want to detach from.
Yeah, so this commerce process for you, um, what all do you share from your lens of, okay, we're coming from a place of what can I do right now? Where do I start? And let's get into a little bit of credit.
Yeah, yeah. So like what I share in Lawful Waters is like pretty much how to make a course map for yourself with this new awareness of information, right? Because number one, it's how do we take in this information? It's different chapters in the USC code and this and that. So we need to intake that, and so then after that, it's really how do we want to plan our life out in regards to what our potential is. You don't want to take this information and stop paying your bills and things and make more trouble for yourself. You
Yeah.
want to take this information and make and if you said, hey, you're going to inherit, if I said, hey, you're going to inherit the earth in 6 months, you would live a little bit differently. You would adjust your plan to inherit the earth, right? So
True.
that's what the course map provides, in the sense of here's where the law says that you have already inherited the earth, and once you read it for yourself, you'll be able to ground it in, right? So we
Exactly.
exactly. So, and this I have been recently reading it in the physical so that I could feel and see and just get off the screen for a second, and it's grounded in a lot more in that way, right?
Hmm.
But what we want for people is to remove tangible obstacles right now, and that's where the awareness of credit comes in. So the foundation is in your rights, because you have all these rights that you're unaware of. So let's go find them, let's read them, let's integrate them, and then let's apply them through a commerce lens. And that's what credit is. Credit is just a right. And what the for who are first getting into this, right, they're like, everything is a commercial transaction because the United States is a big corporation. And
Exactly.
exactly. So that's why our rights are credits, because if we're playing a commercial game, then our rights are packaged in a credit form. And so,
Yes.
by
And
knowing that, we now know what to focus on and dive into.
yes, and for some, if you're new to this information, I like to joke all the time that it's like learning a new language for those of us who are more right brain. And so, this book, can you hold it up again? The book that he's reading, I didn't actually read United States Code until I started taking Chad's courses. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I remember
Title
telling
15.
you, I remember being like, "Can you tell me the exact code of what you're talking about right now? Because I need to learn this language, or I choose to learn this language." And it doesn't let you bypass, because as soon as you start bypassing, something can manifest and just put you right back to where you started. And we joke
Yes.
about this a lot, because I've gotten my car repoed because I got all up on my ego and didn't pay my bills. Got my car repoed. You have gotten situations and you're with your credit and ruined it.
Reposting, cars taken.
Right,
Absolutely.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Same.
So it's important for people to understand that this isn't an escape. This is
Mm-mm.
looking at what we have right in front of us and making a
Mm-mm.
game plan to move forward in that.
Exactly. And like what and why, right? Why from an ego level, from a personal level? Because it solves the money problem. That's really
Yeah.
what this is, you know? Like it solves
Wow.
the money problem. I can't like that's why I'm like, well, you should be studying this even if it's overwhelming for you. People say it's overwhelming. I'm like, then have patience with yourself and just study every day. That's what I do, right?
Mhm.
Because we're going to get there just a little bit of chunk at a time, but
Mhm.
it's going to solve the money problem. That's what credit is. Credit is money. And most of us, all our restriction in our life comes from a financial situation. Even though say I
Right.
disagree with my baby mama, I bet you if you gave her $2,000 every 2 weeks, you wouldn't disagree, you know, or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
So money solves this. All of a sudden, you guys, she's more agreeable because financially she's not burdened now. So it's all, and like people want to say, oh, this money's an issue. No, money's it's such an issue that it's the first one we need to solve, you know? And
Yeah.
so,
And
and
that relates, one thing to help people
yeah,
absorb this a little bit better too is that when we're looking at the collapse, and right now, just to weave
right,
these drops
exactly.
into inflation. Okay, so the biggest perspective shift for me was when you explained to me that on my credit, when you got your credit card and you're looking at your paper, why was it a positive number? And can you explain that to people, of like how you don't owe anything and how they actually,
Yes.
yeah, you go for it.
Yes. Think about it this way. That birth certificate that we said was an instrument, that thing empowers us to go out as agents, and with our social security card and with our signature, we are able to go out and create other instruments. Okay.
Mhm.
And so that instrument is worth money. So a house lease that I sign is actually worth money because I have endorsed it. And so that's the thing that's worth money. Okay. So now what happens is I'm giving them that thing with my signature, right, which has authorized them to now create funds. Banks borrow that money based on
Yes.
that instrument we give them. So now the bank borrows that money from pretty much, or takes the money. They actually create the money. Is how money comes into creation. It's lent, right? But the bank goes and talks to the Fed, and the Fed creates the money, and then the bank gives it to us. Now, the that's our money because that's our bond. Think about it. If imagine if you knew that your child was going to be worth a bunch of money, and so you put their foot on a birth certificate because you know that every time that baby does something, they're going to get paid for that thing. They're supposed to
Mhm.
get money. So because what it is our birth certificate backs money. So that you signing your name, you created the printing of more money, literally. So
Yes.
your instrument endorsed the creation of it. Now, if your instrument endorsed the creation of it, why would it be lent to you? Right? Because
Yeah.
now it can't be lent to me if I'm the one who gave you the bond to print the money to begin with. So the bank's job is to be our intermediary. They're supposed to, that's why we're given a social security card. We go give that to the bank, then they go as the intermediary and talk to the Fed and give us the money. We're not supposed to be paying the bank anything. The bank is actually supposed to be making a little bit of service fee for doing that transaction for us. And
Wow.
banks enrich themselves by sending you that positive number, and then you pay it because they say payment due, right? We're confused. It says
Yeah.
payment due. What that positive number is it is an offset of the books. So it's about, it all comes down to accounting. If you went and you gave them the security instrument and they gave you a credit, the bank issues like they credit your account. Now the ledger has to balance, right? The ledger has to balance. So when you go pay more dollars towards them, they lent you all these money, and then you give them more dollars back, you're throwing off the balance of the books. And so what happens is they are breaking the laws, and they're keeping the offset balance, and they're not getting taxed on that information. That's the way that the banks are enriching themselves. So what that charge, it's actually supposed to be inside of your initial transaction when you gave them. It's supposed to be covered by that initial transaction. And so what that is, when you receive that thing that says it's positive $139, that's actually an error with their company. And by law, we call it a billing error. Because you're like, oh, well, freaking, why is there a number on here? Like, my first initial transaction with you guys should have paid for all of this, right? And so how you respond to that thing that they've sent you in the mail is how we are supposed to, is the proper etiquette to receive that back. So Jilly, when you get something from, Frontier that says $60 plus 60, and it's a little coupon at the bottom, right? What the bank or this company has actually sent you is they're saying, hey, the books are off by $60. What do you want us to do with it? And we are naively sending them $60 when we should actually be going into procedure to tell them to send us that $60.
Wow, which is such a deep, because I see it through the water lens. And when I was feeling into this, when I was first uncovering this, I was like, okay, so I'm the value.
Yes.
Like, I'm the
Every
value.
single person listening, thank
right?
you for how valuable
Like,
you are.
you are valuable, so freaking valuable. And do you even need us to explain this to you? No. Although for me, I came to this point where I was like, I'm not my credit score. I'm not my record. I'm not this name in all caps on a piece of paper. I'm not this identity. So I like to call it identifying the identity, the entity in identity, where the programming gets us to literally associate our value with what they're telling us. Although when you can read code, you can read through it, and it's backwards. It's the water lens and seeing everything backwards. It's backwards. So when you see the money owed, you don't owe anything. You don't owe anything. There is no debt. The illusion of debt. This is the illusion of slavery at its finest. And
it's actually a thank you for doing business.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when you really truly understand this, it is so freeing to every cell, every water molecule in my body, because I knew that this information was real and applicable. And once I could understand it in my psyche, I really just let my body understand it first. But then the commerce process became a spiritual experience. It became emotional shadow work. It became the way that I approached getting my nationals passport, the way that I approached writing the letters to the credit bureaus. It is the state that we're in. And it is beautiful that you bring this lens, because I know that so many people are going to listen to this and be like, what?
Yeah, exactly. It does that. It does. It creates the what, because people are like, that is so backwards from everything I've been taught. And like you said, like the slavery mentality, it's a mentality. That's it. And a mental, it's a thought. We have it completely backwards. And, and it doesn't mean that we go and the next bill you pay, you feel some type of way about, anxious or angry, right? It's about you feel empowered with the next bill, because you see this awareness and you see this potential that's for you. Say, wow, in due time, I'm going to be able to be sending this in and doing this because I'm going to invest the time, and even learning the language that we're learning, we're also learning this language backwards. If you think about it, right? I take you in and I show you one definition in a book you've never read before. And so then you say, well, what do I do? I say, read the chapter. And you're like, well, hold on, I can barely get through the definition. Now the subchapter, now the chapter, now the book. So this is the way in which you read it to you. Like, that's where I'm at. I've read the chapters that I teach, right? And I've read through those chapters over and over again. I've applied
Uh-huh.
those, and now I'm expanding outside of those chapters to say, like, what did I miss? That maybe created the losses that I've experienced, or it's just
You
like
know
knowing
what's
how to speak that language.
exactly, and you know what's very interesting is that it reminds me of conscious language, which I'm so excited. I have somebody coming on talking about quantum grammar soon,
Cool.
and how to sign your name. And
Okay.
have you heard of that? That it's interesting. So essentially, when you said that reading the code first, it's like you're being specific first, which in conscious language, so many people, their psyche is general. They're
Mm.
generalizing and universalizing things and not getting to the specific. And that's why so much miscommunication happens, passive aggressive happens. This is how they trick us in the system, putting words on a piece of paper to trick us. So when you're specific, you start asking specific questions. You start getting in the right brain,
Boom.
which is the God brain.
Mm-hmm.
You get specific. Then once you're specific, you zoom out from there. And then you start looking at what is related to that topic so that you can understand it a little bit more. And then you zoom out all the way to see the bigger picture, where most people just go, new earth is here, now earth is here, bigger picture. And you're
Yeah.
like, wait, come back down, y'all. Like, that's how I felt with a lot of the spiritual community right now, is we're like, okay guys, time to be specific, time to
Mm.
study the specifics on these processes, because in order to feel the confidence of applying this information in your life, doing the due diligence is the alchemy of it, is slowing down and saying, I'm going to understand this. This is why I love your intensives, because I can just sit there and absorb what you're saying. And I've listened to what, 3 of them now four,
Mm-hmm.
coming up on 4 of them, because I'm there to listen and absorb this information. And it is really important that people know that this isn't a quick fix. This isn't an escape. This is actually us shifting the inner workings of everything from the inside out. It's the inside
Thank you.
out.
Thank you.
So
It's
good.
like when you first start working out and you don't see any results on the
Yes.
outside because you're developing core strength on the inside first,
Yes.
that's really what this is. It's core strength. And so the
Exactly.
world might
Mhm.
not see it yet, but you can feel it moving. Start there.
Yeah, exactly. And in our ancestors, like, they're guiding us. They're saying, like, be in your bodies right now, y'all. Like, get your shit together.
Yes, be in your bodies. Thank you. Be in your bodies. As a
Ashe.
6'2" who lives in his head, I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, when I'm in my body, I'm like, this is nice. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
love to just be up in my head. So being in the body is a realization. Yes.
Yes. So from this lens of commerce, there's so many people right now that are dealing with the mandates, and this is why I'm so excited to be on a
Mm-hmm.
podcast and not on a live, because we don't get censored. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what is up with these mandates? What in your lens is up with them through the commerce lens, and what can we do?
Ah, gosh, it's so interesting because
Right.
on one aspect, on one aspect, I'll push and be like, we can push back against them, and like, I can write a consumer exemption for this stuff, right? And another aspect, it seems to me that like what my job is to recreate something else that's that like the system, like, yeah, it seems like I read the other day that 30% of the population is the only one getting the shots, And so
Mhm.
70% of us. So that's why I talked about, our goal is to shift people into like, okay, I'm gonna fix my credit score and then be able to open a business and fund, because yeah, like Bree and I were just talking about, what our solve we want to do right now is like a daycare, because like, damn, we need
Mhm.
one, So like
Yeah.
that's so like that's the shift. But and so for with that's what I believe we should be doing, is taking our commerce and applying new business that operates, outside of
Oh
this, right?
my goodness, I love this so much.
Yes,
Exactly. And it's like,
you can't ask our parents' generation to fix this in that way, and that's who's still
yes.
the teachers. That's who's the head of the police force. Like, even though
Yes.
there's pushback in areas, I still think I don't. As from a commercial lens, I don't know how we can win, if it's you recreate or you push back.
Mhm. Mhm. And the interesting part for me was this drop that came through about standing in our sovereignty instead of fighting for it. And when that's how I very
Yes.
much feel studying commerce. It's like you're it's already there. It's right in front of you. You're not stuck in a fantasy world that's not there. It's actually what is already here, and how we can move the player in the game, know the game and know the player, so that you're not the player not realizing it's in a game. and
Right.
and standing in our sovereignty, because I've gone to these rallies, I've gone to the supervisor meetings, I've talked to these people out in the front lines that are losing their jobs, and I just feel like this whole process for so many is bringing us together. Number one, it is bringing us together, and it's showing
Thank you.
us that even if these protests and these things, quote unquote, aren't working, like the supervisor meeting I went to, the agenda still got passed.
Hmm.
It's still bringing us together, and it's still allowing us to create alliances and start
Mm.
building our own little economies outside of their jurisdiction, really
Yes.
outside of what they're controlling. So what is it that we think they're taking from us in the first place?
Thank
Is
you.
it really ours to
Exactly.
keep? And then standing in that instead of fighting it, because then there's the petitions, and I know that through commerce is also, even to sign a petition, you're technically giving consent to what is already being done.
Right.
You know, and
Exactly. That's a tough reframe.
yes, yeah, and really writing affidavits. Maybe, yeah, let's go into affidavits for a moment for those who don't know what that is. Can you share your lens on writing affidavits and what they're for?
Yeah, all of law is based on like sworn declarations. Like you used to stand up in front of the judge and swear, but because for expediting processes time matter, it graduated into something that could be put down on paper. And so that's what an affidavit is. It's a sworn declaration on paper. Now, in order to move anything in any of the court systems, you need an affidavit because that is truth, and the truth is a fact, and the courts can only operate on facts. And
Mm,
so the affidavit is like kind of our sword in which, we can swing it however we want because we're delivering facts with it.
mhm,
So and then once you read the law, you know the facts and you're like, oh shit, these facts will put them down, so you know how to swing your
mhm,
sword. And so an affidavit is, the way to take your energy through your language, through what you're saying, and putting it on paper, and then putting it into their commercial game of play. So that's the way that we create into the system, is through an affidavit.
it's
Like if anyone's ever been to
speaking.
court, thank you.
Mhm,
If you've ever been to court, they put in a judgment for something. There's always an affidavit in support. Hey, motion to dismiss, an affidavit in support. Da 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 da, affidavit in support. So you'll see that the affidavit is the mechanism which always moves things. So that's why we have to be familiar with swearing our truths that becomes facts, so that they can be at play in this commercial game.
yes, yes, and that's very interesting to me, as well as knowing that our throat chakra, right? Our ability to speak our truth can be grounded into fact, and how much power we actually have with that. Saying that this is true, get it notarized, boom, becomes a fact in that moment. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, there are situations where people lie and people are doing things. Although, when we're in integrity and we're doing this process, we're grounding in truth on
Mm-hmm.
paper. I mean, if we look at word magic and look into the cursive and how people are saying cursives, like the whole energy behind being able to write out your truth in commerce is an initiation in itself for
Mm-hmm.
us
Thank you.
to step into our truth. So again, the whole commerce process can be a spiritual experience. And
It's
another
not
thing
easy to
that,
do. You're
yeah,
right.
yeah. And so can you explain the process of why would you write an affidavit, and then can you go a little bit into how courts are done through the mail? Because I've said that on, here and there, and people are like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So a court is the meeting of a sovereign individual.
Hmm.
So when you run court through the mail, what you're doing is you're having a meeting of the minds, and you're sending it to that company. And so that's where the declaration becomes like that powerful piece that creates the meeting of the minds. That's your mind on paper. And then when you send that in the mail, that is court. Now, the reason why they'll say that, the other reason why they'll say court starts in the mail is because we remember earlier we talked about instruments, right? Well, everything is a court of every court that we know is just a bankruptcy court, and they're all just administering these instruments. Okay, and
Oh,
so what happens is when you follow UCC procedure, which is talks about instrument procedure, and when you move that through the mail properly, that's a procedure. That's an administrative procedure, which is court. Okay, so we're moving in our sovereign capacity through the mail. So that doesn't mean that maybe you just send something in the mail and like that's court. Like, no, it's the understanding of the moving of the instruments is a proceeding, which is court. And
yes.
so that's why understanding like the notary protest process is key. But that's a little more in depth on like court. But then what was the other part of your question? The first part?
Why would we write affidavits?
So we would write affidavits because we want to correct the record. And maybe the record's not up. We want to set the record. The most important thing is the record because it's what the record states at the top of the record that we are sovereign and made and we're protected, right? Now, if any other record gets written that says otherwise about us, then we need to come correct that record in order to protect our like sovereign state. And so that's why we say the administrative or like the sovereignty process isn't just one process, because who's making a record about you and what are they saying? Is it in accordance with what they can say about you? And you use your affidavit to correct that record or affirm that record and make sure that it's in line with who you are. So this is about maintaining your sovereignty, taking that individual aspect and bringing it to the group collective, right? And when you put your affidavit down and you go administer court that way, you're now helping create New Earth by rewriting, right, the way things are supposed to be. So you're taking the law, you're interpreting it as it is
Exactly.
supposed to be. You're
Uh-huh.
putting it down on this affidavit, which is a tool that can be used in their commercial process. And then you're employing what God energy into that. So it's a way of transmuting
Wow.
what you want into their system. You have to use the affidavit,
Exactly.
right? You have
Wow.
to speak their
It's
language and tell them what
so
you
good.
want.
Exactly. And some people just, walk in a store without wearing a mask and then they get mad at the people because they're like, I'm sovereign. I shouldn't have to wear a mask. And nobody knows what you're
It's
talking about.
tough. Exactly.
Choosing to learn their language is like choosing to meet the system where it's at. Once you can meet yourself where you're at, you can see it all. You can see what your options are on where to move, how to move, what to write, where to write it, what companies to deal with. And especially those of us, me included, who had awful credit because I just, early 20s, that's most of us.
What we do. Yeah.
Right. Right. And that credit is just so programmed into our psyche to define us, and it keeps us stale, it keeps us stagnant. And so these solutions that you've been sharing with us, and I'm so excited for the next course map because I'm still going through the process of raising my credit all the way back up so that we can, exercise more with it. And
Yeah.
technically I wrote 3 letters and I got a notification that my credit score went up, and it was
Uh-huh.
about 20 points that it
Okay.
raised. And even though that doesn't seem like a lot, in the short amount of time, it was fast. And in
Yes.
the community, in the sovereignty community, once you guys start following different people, which I'll ask you, if you have any suggestions for people to follow, you'll start seeing how many people are actually winning with this. It's real, and it's a timeline that people have no idea exists.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. There's the winning. Congratulations, by the way, on that.
Thank
On that,
you.
we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
So the credit. That's where I show people they get to win the fastest. You can win for yourself the quickest is against the
Mm.
bureaus because it's about your private information. And so that's when people can become aware that that's a great win to go like, okay, I'm going to use this information. I'm going to clean up my credit score. And it's so validating because your credit score is tied to so much financial stuff. You're using this information to go free yourself and you immediately remove a financial obstacle. And so it's
Yeah.
like, okay, good. This is the direction I'm supposed to be headed. The answer is in credit.
Wow. And it,
Yeah.
it also shows when you're looking at your own abundance, right? And so many people are leaving their jobs and saying, F the system. I wasn't even happy there anyway. Although a lot of people are like, dude, I met police officers and military men and women who had been fighting for their country for years. I mean, years, and they don't want to get this vaccine, and now they're getting kicked out, and it's like, what are we supposed to do now? And the
Rebuild
rise,
ourselves.
right, the rise of the
Mhm.
entrepreneur is happening, and
Thank
it's
you.
happening
Exactly.
fast. And that's
Yes.
why I really feel, I say this a lot, that we are God's people, and I feel it
Hmm.
so deeply. And when I look at the court system, and I'm looking at the programming of just different, for example, you are guilty until proven innocent in the court system, in their jurisdiction. What does that do to our psyche? And how
Right.
is that contributing to colonization and domestication in itself? It reminds me of religion. How we, like, our relationship with God is our own. We walk with that every day in our relationship. And all of a sudden we got all these people in between trying to tell us what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to be like. It's a hijacking. It's a reversal of what is our God-given rights and our inheritance from our ancestors. Like,
And we can always come how we want. And I like what you're
Ashe.
saying. It's the rise of the entrepreneur. It's the rise of entrepreneur because that's how we solve it better. Because the
Mhm.
tools are in place to where we could push back against these mandates, where we
Mhm.
could say, like, you don't have standing and you don't have jurisdiction and you don't have a lot of these things to bring this on us, right? If
Yes.
people knew how to push back, that's the revolution. But what is the revolution? The revolution is like of the mind. So when we free that aspect and we go, when we apply credit and we give our talents and we create new business with our talents, we eliminate that old broken system instead of turning and fighting against the old system. I think that's the realization and why we talk about this shift, why the goal is to open up credit, because then if you only make $10 a week making baskets, credit will allow you to do that, and then eventually you're going to be giving back, and those are going to solve in the same way that they
Mhm.
that you're what you thought once was, right? And so
Yes.
that's the rebuild. Because, and I'm going to give some give you, I learned this last night. Okay, within every single state language within the federal, okay, they talk about where these in the law, they talk about if you receive something, they said, so and so is in the state. This happened in the state. Jilly was speeding and she
Yes.
was driving in the state. Okay. If you look at the definition of in the state, it means within the exterior limits of the state.
Okay. Whoa. Okay.
Within the exterior limits of the state. So they're saying that the in the state is not in the state. So, like, and then when you go look at the federal definition of what in the state is, it's either inside that 10 square miles or it has to be registered to the state in the BLM, right? Or
Wow.
to the feds in the BLM. So they don't have any jurisdiction to do anything that they want, except for, let me tell you, on public, like schools, public parks,
Mm.
things like that, where they really do like that. That's why I'm like this. That's why we're talking about the daycare, because I'm like the school thing. We have to walk away from the school thing. Like, and
Yeah.
then if parents walk away from the school thing, that means they're walking away from their job, because the jobs
Yeah.
want them there from the same time. But honestly, if you want to solve a broken family, you put the kids and the parents back together, right? You stop sending them away from each other every day. So I think
Yes.
that's another way that Source is telling us the entrepreneur way. You guys, you find a problem, solve it, give back to the collective, and then this credit information that we're finding is the tool in which you use to empower it financially, because it's not about money. Money solved with credit. Go give your gifts, right? And then everything Brother Truth showed us with trust is pretty much about how we're going to move that down to our next generation. It's going to be
Mhm.
generational wealth, so that my child can just go work towards his craft and not work towards his rent.
Exactly. And this shift to truly know what we're building, for me in my path, like building our community, I feel like we did everything backwards too. It started with entrepreneurship, it started with the water, it started with the bonds, it started with the community. And then it was like, wow, realistically, like it's time to build a trust. It's time to take the next step. Building our retreat center, having that be the grand vision. And what does that mean? Do I do a religious assembly? What are my options for this? It seemed like the course slowed down for me to really integrate what I'm building and understand it process by process by process. And I
Right.
encourage everyone to start their entrepreneurship journey, even if it's small, even if it's
Yes.
opening up a trust. And for those of you who have LLCs and who have businesses already, you can just as easily coincide. Like you
You should
can
have one.
build. Yes, exactly. And in the process of doing so, uh, taking the baby steps of building what we see can happen now instead of later, and sharing with our communities how we're doing that instead of
Mm.
just getting stuck in all the stories and the news and what's going on and the dollar is going to collapse and this is going to happen and that is going to happen. Okay, perfect. Yes. And get your shit together. Like that's
Yeah,
like my
exactly,
phrase that I've been
exactly.
saying lately is get your shit together.
Yeah, like turn the TV off, and then get to
Yes.
like working,
Yes.
get to working for yourself in that way, even if it's
Hmm.
just becoming aware of the knowledge of how to free yourself, because
Yeah.
it's a little step at a time, and little steps
Yeah.
is all it takes.
So can you share oh, we could keep on talking and talking. Maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime. Although I feel like this is a good foundation for everyone. Can you share what your offerings are coming up and
Yes.
yeah, your vision for Lawful Waters?
Yes, thank you. So my next course map is coming up November 5th through the 7th. It's a 3-day intensive where we're going to go in and show you the most important definitions within all the codes that are written. And there's a couple of different codes, right? And so the goal is to show you exactly what you need to study in order to go out and to create financial wins for yourself using credits, right? And this is all I'm doing is sharing my experience. It's not financial advice, but I'm going to share how, right, credit scores are cleared, right? How we clear and boost credit scores. I'm going to show how people discharge their mortgage like the pass through. So it's large with this offering. What we're going to do is really give you the foundations to go read for yourself and be able to execute. We're going to look at all the processes that people do to obtain remedy, right? Get their financial wins, and then why they do those processes. And
Mhm.
so what happens is people take classes and they're looking for cut and dry templates for how to go out and do things. But you won't know what to do. No one will know what to do unless they have read these chapters themselves. And so
Mm.
it's a very much intensive of reading the most important sections together and then saying how we string the laws together. We're just going to give
Mhm.
examples of hey, this is how I string it together when I talk to them. And so
Mhm.
that's the goal of Lawful Waters, is to allow, when you're finished, to really be able to go out and clean your credit yourself, because once you're aware of your information, you can take control of it, and then give you the foundations to go out there and study enough to go out and get things like remedy, like title, in regards to like your car and your house and things
Yes.
like that, because those are things that it's so hidden in the codes that if you don't read it and comprehend it and have patience with yourself, you'll make a mistake. And so
Mhm.
that's what it is. You'll be part of, once you take the class, you're part of our Telegram chat where we're checking
Yep.
in and having conversations as things move and
Yep.
people learn things. You'll have access to the recordings because you want to go back and reground and integrate into these things. And so really, it's the UCC, the USC, and the CFR. So the UCC codes will talk about your birth certificate. The USC codes will talk about your rights, and then the CFR codes will talk about your what the regulations are to protect your rights. And so
Mm.
once you're aware of those, you can string them together and go out and get your remedy.
Perfect. Wow. So exciting. And I mean everything that we've been sharing the past hour, I mean this is the first layer of it. So if you're new to this information, take it slow. Just remember that you're exactly where you are meant to be and open to this new information. Do you have any resources that you want to share with anybody of how they can find you?
Yes. So lawfulwaters.com is where we're going to be, as where the course map's at. You can go to Lawful Waters Instagram. And then I do have my personal Radchad, Raddchad. And then within the course map too, we're going to be giving you lots of other resources to go find. I could name a million ones, like Brother Truth, that we have
Yes.
used and contributed, and active ones I'm acquiring right now. So that's another part we're going to be providing, is what other communities should you be involved with in order
Mhm.
to get this information. So
I love it. Wow. Thank you so
thank you
much.
so
So
much, love.
good.
Appreciate it. And we'll be talking soon again.
Yes,
And
we
yeah, to
will.
everyone listening, thank you all for tuning in, and much love and appreciation. And look forward to building with everybody.
Thank you. Mahalo, everyone. Have a
Mahalo.
beautiful day.